All right, ready to dive into frugal living today. We've got expert tips from the writers over at Wisebread. I'm excited to see how they think we can live large without spending large.
It's going to be interesting to see how they bring it all together, being practical and creative, and even a bit of psychology, too, to help us see value where we might not expect it.
Very interesting. Well, why don't we start unpacking all this advice?
Sounds good to me.
First up, let's head over to the kitchen.
Okay.
So Wisebread suggests we can use simple ingredients like saffron and chipotle peppers to add a gourmet flair to our meals. What do you think about that?
I think it's fascinating how these small additions can really change how we see a dish.
Oh,
Like, our senses are going to interpret them as a sign of quality and sophistication, which enhances the whole dining experience without the big price tag.
that's a great point. I'm already thinking of some tasty ideas. And while we're talking about all this delicious food, what are your thoughts on their advice about using cheaper wine for cooking?
That's a great strategy. Like, with dishes such as beef bourguignon or coq au vin, the wine's main purpose is to add some depth and complexity.
Hmm.
It's not really meant to be the star of the show, so it makes total sense to go for a more affordable bottle.
I'm definitely going to try that. Now, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about travel. It can get so expensive so fast. What really stood out to you in their travel section?
Well, they had some really good points about how to kind of bridge that gap between dining out and eating at home, which I think can be really helpful even if you're not traveling.
Tell me more about that. I am always trying to find ways to spend less money at restaurants.
Well, one thing they said was to have a little snack before dinner so you're not so hungry and don't overspend because you're just grabbing whatever looks good at the moment.
Oh, that makes sense. It's so easy to forget about little things like that. And it reminds me of something else they suggested about choosing high-quality prepared foods,
Yeah,
like as a more convenient and affordable alternative to takeout.
exactly. It's about finding those smart little ways to get those restaurant quality meals without actually paying restaurant prices. And speaking of cooking resourcefully, they also suggest trying out new recipes on the weekends.
Oh, I love that.
It's like going on a little adventure, but in your own kitchen.
It is. Speaking of adventures, how about we get into some home improvement and DIY projects? Wisebread has some really interesting ideas there.
Oh, you're going to love their advice about ice cube trays. It's full of unexpected uses that you can actually put into practice.
Okay, I'm listening.
For instance, they suggest freezing leftover tomato sauce, pesto, or even stock in ice cube trays.
Wow, I never would have thought of that.
It helps reduce waste, and it gives you these perfectly portioned little flavor bombs that are ready to go whenever you need them.
Brilliant. I'm constantly trying to figure out what to do with leftover ingredients, so this is a total game changer. And it fits perfectly with their whole idea of maximizing resources.
Absolutely. And speaking of maximizing resources and getting creative, let's talk about one of their most interesting sections, 44 ways to use beer besides drinking it.
Now, that sounds intriguing. I have to admit, I was a little bit skeptical at first, but now I'm really curious.
I think you'll find it pretty funny. They suggest using beer for all sorts of things, like polishing jewelry or even bringing wood furniture back to life.
Wait, really? Beer can do all that?
Apparently so. It's amazing what you can come up with when you're trying to be frugal and resourceful. It's all about looking at something and seeing potential where other people might not.
And let's not forget their advice about how to use a strategically spilled beer to get someone's attention.
Ah, yes, a classic example of resourcefulness with a little bit of humor thrown in. It's a good reminder that frugal living doesn't have to be all about strict rules and never spending money. It can be fun too.
I completely agree. It's about being playful and clever with what you have. Okay, before we get too caught up in all this beer-soaked fun, maybe we should take a moment to summarize some of the key things we've learned for our listeners. We've talked about a lot, and I want to make sure they come away with some solid steps they can actually take toward a more frugal lifestyle.
That's a great idea. Why don't we try to condense all of this into 10 strong points that they can start using right away?
Perfect. All right, first and foremost, let's really highlight the power of using affordable but tasty ingredients like saffron and chipotle peppers to make their meals more exciting without breaking the bank.
Yes, and to build on that, let's remind them that they don't need to spend a lot of money on fancy wine for cooking. Simpler wines work just as well for dishes like beef bourguignon.
Absolutely. And to cut back on all those tempting restaurant trips, let's encourage them to try having a small snack before dinner. That way they'll be less likely to overspend just because they're hungry.
Another great idea. And as a cheaper and easier alternative to takeout, let's point them towards trying out some high-quality prepared foods.
And to help them get even more creative in the kitchen, let's introduce them to the idea of freezing leftovers like sauces and pesto in ice cube trays. It cuts down on waste and creates these little flavor bombs that are ready to go whenever they need them.
Yes, and moving beyond the kitchen, how about we reveal the surprising cleaning power of beer? They can try using it to polish up their tarnished jewelry.
While they're at it, why not suggest they experiment with using flat beer to revitalize their old wood furniture? It's all about embracing the unexpected versatility of everyday things.
Now, for a more general life hack, let's remind them about the classic strategy of cooking in bulk and freezing portions to enjoy later. It saves so much time and money.
And to help them connect with their inner environmentalist, let's inspire them to repurpose old newspapers. They can use them to line their trash cans or protect delicate items when they're packing.
And finally, to round out our 10 tips, let's suggest they invest in a personal water filter for their faucet. It reduces plastic waste and saves money on bottled water in the long run.
What a fantastic list of practical tips. Now, before we wrap things up for this part of our deep dive into frugal living with Wise Bread, I'd like to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about a lot of hands-on advice today, but are there any other ways, maybe less obvious ones, that a frugal mindset can have a positive impact on different areas of your life, not just your finances?
That's a really thought-provoking question. It makes you consider how this way of thinking might affect your relationships, your values, and even how you view abundance.
Exactly. It's a fascinating topic to explore.
Welcome back. I'm really looking forward to diving into some more of this great advice from Wise Bread.
Me too. There's still so much to learn, and I'm especially interested in those areas of frugal living that go beyond just basic budgeting.
Right. I mean, they cover things like how to make your clothes last longer, or put together a budget-friendly beauty routine, or even how to navigate the workplace with a frugal mindset. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. It's like they created a guide for living frugally in every part of your life. What parts of this really caught your eye?
Well, I was really drawn to their advice on getting your security deposit back.
Oh, okay.
They do a great job of mixing practical tips with real-life stories so it feels relatable and useful.
I remember that section. It's a gold mine, especially if you've ever had a bad experience with a landlord.
For sure. It really shows how a frugal approach often means being proactive and knowing your rights as a tenant.
That's so true. It's not always about saving pennies, but about protecting yourself from those potential financial disasters.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of protecting your things, their advice on making your clothes last longer is also super valuable.
Oh, right. Like what?
Like just doing simple things such as using a stain remover pen or airing out your clothes instead of washing them every time can make a big difference.
That's a great way to be more sustainable with your clothes and make your wardrobe budget stretch even further. And their beauty tips are amazing too. Have you tried that DIY astringent with green tea?
Not yet, but I am curious about it. It's incredible how many natural, affordable alternatives there are out there compared to those pricey beauty products.
It's a true testament to resourcefulness and just trying things out. And on the topic of resourcefulness, their tips on how to be frugal at work are really relevant right now with all the changes in the job market.
They cover a lot of ground, from dealing with job losses to negotiating a better salary.
I thought their advice on job interviews was really helpful. They give some subtle but powerful techniques for showing confidence and standing out.
Like that suggestion to end your sentences on a lower note.
Yeah, that one was interesting.
Apparently, it makes you sound more confident and authoritative.
Sometimes those little details can make all the difference. It's fascinating how Wisebread can provide those big picture strategies and specific tactics to help us do well in all these different parts of life.
They really cover everything from negotiating your cable bill to finding hidden treasures on eBay. They've really thought of it all.
And they aren't afraid to try unconventional things either. I was intrigued by their section on mystery shopping. It sounds like a fun way to make some extra cash while getting better at being a smart consumer.
It does sound fun, and it really fits with that resourceful spirit you see throughout their whole collection.
Before we move on from this part, I want to mention all those great resources they provide at the end.
Oh, yeah.
They have this huge list of websites, books, and blogs for people who are just starting out with frugal living, all the way to those who are already pros.
It's like they've given us this amazing toolkit for taking charge of our finances and being more mindful with our spending.
Totally. But even with all this practical advice and all these resources, I feel like there's a deeper message throughout their work.
Definitely, they go beyond just pinching pennies. Wisebread really advocates for a more thoughtful approach to spending where you prioritize experiences, relationships, and personal growth over material possessions.
It's a whole different way of looking at things that can lead to a more meaningful life no matter how much money you make.
And that brings us back to what you were saying earlier about those less obvious ways frugal living can impact your life beyond finances. It really makes you think about how this mindset might affect your relationships, your values, and even how you see abundance.
That's such a fascinating idea. It's something we'll definitely have to keep exploring as we continue our deep dive into the wisdom of Wisebread.
Let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back to uncover that last layer of insights they have for us.
And we're back for our final look at frugal living wisdom with the experts at Wisebread.
Indeed.
We've already uncovered so many great tips and thought-provoking insights. but there's even more to learn.
That's right. Wise Bregg's approach to personal finance goes way beyond just basic saving strategies. They give us really valuable guidance on topics like investing, managing debt, and even incorporating charitable giving into a frugal lifestyle.
I was so impressed by their whole approach to investing. It's really comprehensive,
Yeah.
especially their section on what's it called, asset allocation for your portfolio. It takes something that seems really complicated and makes it easy to understand for anyone.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't know a lot about finance,
Right.
they explain all these different types of assets like stocks and bonds and real estate.
Uh-huh.
And they show you how to put together a portfolio that's tailored to your risk tolerance and how long you want to invest.
Right.
It makes you feel like you can actually take control of your financial future.
It's empowering for sure. And while they encourage us to be proactive with investing, they also give us some really smart strategies for managing debt, which is something a lot of people struggle with these days.
Yeah.
Their section on dirty secrets credit card companies don't want you to know is a must read.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It exposes all those sneaky tactics they use to keep people trapped in that cycle of debt.
It's so important to understand things like interest rates, fees, and minimum payments.
It is. It can be such a confusing world out there.
And they give some practical ways to pay off debt more effectively,
Like what?
like the snowball method. You focus on paying off your smallest debts first to gain some momentum and stay motivated.
It's a really popular method too, and once you have a handle on your debt, you can start focusing on those more rewarding aspects of personal finance,
Like what?
like charitable giving.
Right. Even if you're on a tight budget, Wisebread has some really creative ideas for supporting causes that are important to you.
They have a whole section on giving to charity on the cheap,
Oh, I like that one. It was full of affordable ways to give back.
and a lot of times it doesn't even have to involve money. You can donate your time or skills instead.
That's a great way to make a difference and gain valuable experience at the same time.
Exactly. And of course, there's always regifting.
Oh, yeah, a classic.
It's a great way to be eco-conscious and save money on gifts.
And their guidelines for regifting are really helpful. So you can be thoughtful without accidentally offending anyone. It really shows how much they care about every aspect of personal finance, from saving and investing to managing debt and giving back to others,
They really do encourage us to make sure our spending aligns with our values,
to create a life that's truly fulfilling.
not just financially, but personally as well.
Before we finish up our deep dive, let's go back over those 10 key takeaways we talked about.
Sure. So first up, let's remind everyone about the power of using those affordable but tasty ingredients like saffron and chipotle peppers.
Right, to make their meals more exciting without going over budget.
And to add to that, we can encourage them to rethink spending a lot on fancy wine for cooking.
Because simpler wines work just fine in dishes like beef bourguignon,
To keep those restaurant costs down, let's remind them about having a small snack before dinner.
so they won't be as tempted to overspend just because they're hungry.
And as a cheaper and easier alternative to takeout, they can explore the world of high-quality prepared foods.
Let's not forget about freezing those leftover ingredients in ice cube trays. It's a great way to reduce waste.
It is, and it creates those little flavor bombs for later. Moving beyond the kitchen now, we can reveal that surprising cleaning power of beer.
They can try using it to polish their jewelry and revitalize old wood furniture.
And for a more general life hack, we can remind them about the classic strategy of cooking in bulk and freezing portions.
Saves so much time and money.
It really does. And to bring out that inner environmentalist, let's inspire them to repurpose old newspapers.
For lining trash cans or protecting delicate items when packing.
And finally, we can encourage them to invest in a personal water filter for their faucet.
To cut down on plastic waste and save money on bottled water over time.
So many practical tips to take away.
As we conclude our deep dive into the world of frugal living with Wise Bread, I encourage our listeners to take all this wisdom and make it their own. Remember, frugal living isn't about depriving yourself.
Not at all.
It's about making conscious choices that empower you and help you live a life that truly reflects your values. Until next time, keep being resourceful, enjoy those experiences, and live a life that's full of purpose and meaning.